Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the startup series. Thank you for joining in. And this will be our last episode in the season three. And in this season, we have been able to address some of the very key issues and areas which needed attention. We were able to touch more than 1,000 people who were interested to learn. I'm so glad that the startup community is really open to learn. And I look forward to know more topics, what you want to learn, and I will do my best to get the speakers who will share those valuable lessons. We are also starting a WhatsApp community to help startup community to and keep them posted about on our events and also enabling the networking. Please do join the group. If you're a startup founder or investor, my team will also post the group link right away. Now today we will pick up from where we left off. Last time we talked about angel versus when VC funds, and today is the next logical step. It's going to be about pitching, a subject that is consistently at the front of the mind of startups. And it's all important that, hey, I'm going for an investor pitch. Welcome to another edition of Startup Series. I'm Govind Kedia, and with my team at Arctic Invent, we aim to help companies increase their enterprise value and protect them against copycats by way of building strategic IP portfolio. We help and handhold startups and companies through entire process of discovery to grant of their IP assets. Now, a quick round of introductions first, and a reminder to interact with the panel through the comment section. Please feel free to post your questions while the session. I will pick them either during the conversation or in the end. So stay and stick till the end. Now, today's panel is very, very special for me. My first guest, Rahul, he is the one who took a bet on me in my early days of my career, brought me in, and that's why I'm in the IP today. So first, let me welcome, my guru, mentor, and dearest friend, Rahul. Welcome, Rahul, to the startup series. And over to you. I can give your introduction, but I would let you introduce yourself very briefly for the audience today.
Thank you so much. Very nice of you, Govind, to create this opportunity to be together again. And I think talking of betting on companies, I think it starts with betting on people. And I'm glad I bet on you. I think you had all the right ingredients that anybody needs at the early stage, whether of a company or a career. So it has been excellent knowing you over almost, it's coming close to 15, 16 years now. My name is Rahul. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for your interest in the series that Arctic Invent has created for you. I think our time together, Govind and mine, in intellectual property taught us, how important it is to protect your assets early. So I currently work at Google. I've been at Google more than 10 years now. I returned from Australia to join my current role here. Prior to Google Hyderabad, I was based in Australia. I used to sell big data solutions. And prior to that, along with Govind and other fantastic people, I spent close to a decade in various things in intellectual property, from creating intellectual property to protecting, monetizing for customers in economies that protect intellectual property. And I started my career as a computer science engineer. So feels like a few lives packed into one. Over the last 6-7 years, along with my friend Uday, who will also be joining us, we've been building some muscle in investing in early stage companies as a part of our own diversification need first, but then realizing that this is what we really enjoy. So I feel that my work at Google, prior work in intellectual property and technology in general, kind of gives us a unique vantage point into early stage investing. So very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Great. Thanks, Rahul. And joining him is Uday, like Rahul introduced, co-founder at Blue Lotus Ventures. Welcome, Uday, to the startup series. Let Uday come in on the stage. Bharat, can you please add Uday? Okay. Looks like some technical issues. Just give us a second.
So while Uday is coming in, I can just give a quick intro of Uday. So I've of course known Uday for the last 20 plus years. Always seen him and admired him for his extreme clarity of thought. And I really feel that his unique background, which is an amalgamation of lots of experience, rich experience in investment banking with firms in New York and Paris, and also his obsession for critical thinking, which is also a topic that he teaches at the school and the university levels. I think is really a gift to our early stage investing ventures. There he is. Uday.
Okay, great.
Hey,
Right.
hey, Govind.
In
Thanks for
continuation,
having me.
thank you. There for now on the screen. So please, let's hear from you. I think Rahul
No,
has
very
already.
shortly, Rahul's already
Yeah,
said something. I want to I want to add to that. Thank you, Rahul. You're very generous. So yeah, Amuday, I study great businesses, people, and ideas. I'm a fan of David Senra's Founders podcast. If you haven't looked it up, please do. It's really awesome. I'm a VC, but I also follow the public markets both in India and in the US. I have an interest in value investing, and I ended up spending a significant amount of time, number of years, studying the great capital allocators for both from India and the US. Big believer in the India story since early 2011, and super bullish on Indian entrepreneurs. And excited to share whatever I can with the founders here.
great. No, thanks, Rahul and Uday for joining us. Now, when we imagine pitching, we think about Shark Tank. Of course, it's not new to the world; it has been around, but maybe for India and has surely changed the dinner conversations at our home. People enjoy watching pitches. The simplicity of the premise is pitch your idea, get funded, is what grabs your attention. But there's a lot more goes into all important pitch, and to help understand and break down what pitch really matters is, of course, we are discussing today, and knowing you, I should not be calling you shark but more like a dolphin. But before we get into the content of pitch, let's look at what is it that startup get wrong when making that pitch. Could you just list three things that startup get wrong, three things that absolute no, and enough to turn off any interest that may have in the startup? So Rahul, why don't you start with that?
No, absolutely. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to kind of, from a light touch to a heavy touch, assess maybe thousands of companies. Uh, but yeah, I mean, in terms of what is a clear no, which is a cliff drop from there on, I'd say first is perceived lack of integrity, right? Because investing in a company and being an early entrant and staying with the company, I think it's at least a 6, 8, 10 year horizon thing. So this is a start of a relationship, right? A relationship has to be based on trust and integrity. So when I perceive that somebody's just making stuff up, I'd much rather have somebody tell me that I don't know and let me get back to you, as opposed to just come across as making stuff up. I think that is really a quick one. Then there is no turning back from there. Because like I said, it's a long-term relationship. It has to start on a place of trust. Second is, I think some people try to impress through jargon, through like buzzwords and all that. Sure, I mean, maybe sometimes those words are needed for the story, but if they stay only at that level and uh, do not come across as possessing clarity, or what exactly are you saying without the crutch of the jargon words, I think that also is a problem. And then third is detail. What is some people are too detailed and they'll just go on and on and on. And some people are so superficial that I think, of course, pyramid principle is good. Start with the high level, keep going deeper based on the questions. But some people stay at such a high level that it is very clear that even if the founders don't possess detail and insight, then how will they build something? Because it is very clear to us that early stage founders will have to pivot multiple times. So their clarity is what will carry them. But if somebody is not gifted with clarity, I think that will be a burden. So these three things: integrity, jargon, and detail, I think I would say are a clear drop for me.
Great. Thanks. Uday, what do you think?
Those are excellent points, and I echo that very much. I think maybe a couple of things to add is they don't sell the problem very well. If they don't, and they leave investors with the avoidable "so what" question, that's an issue, right? When you're selling a problem, eventually you're going to get to selling the solution, but even when you're defining the problem, you have to pre-acknowledge that there's going to be a "so what," and so what that this problem exists, and have you spent time articulating why this matters? So that's an important. You ideally should not leave that on the table and just leave it to chance. So that's one thing. The second thing is early stage is not without competition, right? So this competition exists universally. So you have to acknowledge competition. So it's not. It's very rare to say that there is no competition. There's always different types of competition. So acknowledge competition, and when they do acknowledge competition, they actually shy away from distinguishing themselves. What really distinguishes you and your team? So spend some time thinking about that lens. That there is a vast array of competitive forces, and there's only this much value that can be captured on a market. So reflect on that and think about where everybody is in this value capture and where you are trying to penetrate and come in. So that is something that also evinces clarity. It's worth spending some time on.
Sure. Great. No, thank you. And I think this is where we wanted to start to set the premise that, what are the basic things? And thank you, Rahul, for sharing that. Now, before I ask, questions which are related to pitch, let's address this question, which is more internal. That a lot of talented founders, especially in the deep tech, who are really great what they do, are, have this feeling that they are not a salesperson. They are not like a great orator. They cannot perform like a performance of in a kind of Shark Tank situations. What is your advice to those founders who are operating from not good enough sales or orator mindset? How do you tackle that feeling? And then we can dive on this topic more. But this is something I found very common questions with the founders and not good enough feeling with them. Uday, you want to start on this one?
I don't personally feel a good oratory is so important. Like, it's okay if you're not a public speaker, but you do need to be able to tell a story well, regardless. As a founder, you need to convince a lot of people. First, you need to convince yourself. So you need to be articulate enough about that. Then you need to get your co-founders really believe and catch fire literally with what you're building. And then you need to get investors to really understand what you are saying, which very few people are. So even if you're a deep tech person and you're a bit of a geek, that doesn't absolve you from this responsibility of being able to story tell really well. And it's okay, sometimes, we're quite, we try to be broad. We're not specific on English, for example. If you can do it in Hindi or some other language, great. But you need to have that ability, right? And you can sense it, you can feel it when somebody is carrying that. And that, I feel, it's not so much a matter of public persona. You don't have to be business savvy. You don't have to be an MBA type to do these things. You can just be a good storyteller. And for that, you can simply study the art of storytelling. There's plenty of good material, and one can just persistently learn what does it take to communicate effectively in any language of choice. It does not have to be English, especially in India, but it's an acquired skill. So I'll leave it at that. Rahul?
Sure. Thanks, Rahul.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I'd say that a successful founder cannot stay in the mindset of I don't know X and full stop, right? Because if you don't know X, embrace that growth mindset and go figure something out. It's not about becoming the world's best orator, or it's not about becoming a Shashi Tharoor in that sense, right? But it is still, if you don't know something which is vital for the growth of your business, spend a time effort in it, right? Like do it. But at the same time, oration is not equal to English language. It is not equal to eloquence. We've invested in companies. I have invested in companies where most of the pitch was Hindi or English, and that's absolutely right. We are in India. It's perfectly good, because like they said, I want to plus one that point that convincing yourself, your family, your support system, your co-founders, your investors, employees, partners, suppliers, banks, credit, etc., will require your ability to communicate 100%, right? So you cannot shy away from it, but do not make it such a barrier for yourself that you feel paralyzed by it. I think very important is to be able to reflect your depth mindset, right? Somebody who's building a venture has to come across as a deep person, and that is not only by language, it's also body language, right? It's also confidence, it's also your ability to come across as having thought about a number of things. And some of my favorite favorite founders have been people who seem to have an answer for every question I can think of, because they've just spent an agonizing amount of time thinking, and it's not always a crisp answer, but just those things are important. Reflecting your grit is very important. But at the same time, I will say because it's so important. So practice, right? I mean, you're going to go meet, what's the new name, Peak 15 Ventures, right? I mean, you practice the damn pitch that you have. With smaller entities or with individuals like me, I mean, you can come in and, just communicate a bit of warmth, and we'll spend time, you can talk. But this is not an optional activity. I think it is worth investing in building some skill set.
Great. No, that's really insightful. The first thing that we kind of undercovered, that these are the three basic, kind of fundamental, tenet of a person. Clarity, integrity, and then this ability to learn. I think this is. I think if we focus on this fundamental, I'm really sure the pitching that the conversation we are about to have is going to be taken care 50% already, because I think these are the basics. And a lot of people say success lies in the basics, right? So I think great insights. Thank you, Rahul and Uday, for sharing it. Now, I'm sure people in the audience would have taken a note, what we have pointed out. I'm sure there will be questions, and please post question. I can see a lot of people being on live with us. Please post a question, because that would really make it more interactive. Now, I would like to establish a format as we move forward onto content of the pitch. I'll put forward a topic, and would you, Uday and Rahul, put forward your views, and let's hear from that topic from startup point of view. Is that okay with you? Let's start from there. So let's start with understanding the business as a first kind of content in the pitch. How important is to have a clear and a concise description of what startup does, what problems they are solving, and what target market and customers personas are they doing for? More importantly, what are you looking for here? I think this is like, some basic questions, but how do you really, evaluate these understanding of the business question or the pitch when we are making this?
Should I start?
Sorry.
So I think so. Let's look at maybe at least just two stages between you, the founder, and the investor, right? So one is, of course, you getting a meeting or intro with them, and second is, of course, the time that you can spend live. The first is quite a big elimination stage, right? I mean, if you're sending a cold email, I think sometimes people just send a poorly formatted, bad grammar, bad language kind of thing. So that itself is a turn off. The subject itself can be a bit of a thing. So I'm assuming that that stage is past, and being very clear and concise in that stage is very, very important. So do think about it. A lot of the elimination happens there. But assuming that you've got time with the potential investor, so I think it's very important about the problem space that you're tackling, about having an insight really, because without identifying what Govind would recall this term from our intellectual property days, without identifying the white space, how do you communicate that? What exactly are you solving for? So like what they said earlier, I think solution is important, but we fully recognize that solutions will come and go. I think, but is the problem space? Is there a fit between the founder or the founding team and the problem space? Is there a fit between the founder and the founding team and the solution that they're building? Right. So that market founder and founder solution, both of those fits are very, very important. And I mean, of course, different funds may have different thematics. So that is around the time when the investor is likely assessing a fit between what they want to spend their fund on or funds on and what this company is building. I think target market persona are important at maybe a little bit, let's say, seed to series A kind of stage. But at the place where I am most comfortable with the pre-seed, I think it's very important to know that the problem space is relevant and there is a fitment between the team and the problem space. Of course, I mean, if somebody can reflect a clarity on customer persona, what are they building, why would they buy, how large is it? I think those things are very, very important. But just describing why this is a large problem, why you are the right person, I think those two are very important for me at this stage.
Okay.
No, I echo that. I'm not sure there's much. I will acknowledge that it's hard to do it. This is not easy. So maybe just study as much as you can of how other people have done this. So study the art of pitching as much as you can. There's plenty of good material as a founder for you to build on and see how this has been addressed. It's not trivial. It takes effort, but it's possible to do it really well. So yeah, think of these in your business context, in your startup context, and see how you could communicate that well.
Great. So the next area would be evaluating team or founder pedigree or expertise. Now, how much a factor of team and founder quality in your evaluation? What is a weightage given to a founding team's qualification and past experience? Do you look for balanced team with complementary skills? And finally, the passion and commitment of founder a deciding factor. There's also a comment from Jayant saying that founder team and the product. Could you share experience where you found this misfit, Rahul? So I think related to this conversation. So how would you go for that? Maybe Uday, you want to take this one first.
Look, we funded startups with top credentials as well as no credentials. And I mean by that, for example, college dropouts. And these are not IIT or MIT college dropouts. These are tier 2 college dropouts. So we're looking for signals, right? And these signals come in many different forms. And it's actually very hard to generalize. Founders should reflect on, obviously, why they're the right team for the problem and try and get that across. And honestly, and to be quite straightforward about it, if you can't sell that aspect of your strength, that's a weak sign on your ability to sell, period. So balanced team, complementary skills, these things are, again, it's very hard to subjectively speak about this, because after seeing hundreds and hundreds of decks in different spaces, I'm sure many investors start to get a flavor for what type of skill sets might actually work together, what type of personalities. And this is an initial guess, right? So if it's interesting enough, then you actually have a conversation and substantiate your own understanding. And you might be wrong, you might be right, but then you again recalibrate over and over. And then you get those things like you mentioned about passion, commitment. You get a sense of that, and you get a sense of the amount of dedication that is going into this business building. So, for example, on the flip side, somebody with top credentials might be able to walk away to a top job in some other industry, or he or she might have several things to their credit which are obvious, some things which may not be obvious, and similarly founders who don't have many strong credentials on paper, at least, might have several other data points which will not be showing up on a pitch deck or a LinkedIn profile or even their CV. So you have to sort of hunt it out, and you have to know how to hunt it out. So sure, team plays a huge, it's probably the largest role, as even Mark Andreessen acknowledges this, that at the pre-seed or very early stage, team is almost everything.
Sure. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to start there. I think at the stage where I like to invest, I think team is probably one of the most important things next to the problem space. So many things. I think, like Uday said, I have not been able to come across a rubric which is a must, which is a sure shot, right? Like definitely backed founders from IIT Bombay and all the IITs, backed founders from Harvard and other business schools. And those are the companies that were the first ones to shut down. And backed founders who were dropouts, and those companies are doing very well, and everything in the middle. So I think if somebody did not go to IIT, I think maybe your chances of building a very successful venture are higher, because the person who went to IIT also looks at the mirror and says that I went to IIT, so maybe I have a lot of options, and if it works, it's fine. If it doesn't, then okay. So that is a problem. So I mean, essentially, all I'm trying to say is not taking a dig at IITs. I'm very, very proud of IITs, but there's no one factor. I think nobody should put themselves down because they went to a certain institute or did not. But what is important is, I mean, I'm very interested in knowing the person's story in general, right? Of late, I've found that sports people tend to have the grit that is likely needed. So being a sports person is a plus, and I'm saying that as not a sports person. I'm not a sports person, but I definitely feel that that always comes across as a plus because you've experienced things which no academic institution will necessarily teach you only. So that is there. If there are more than one founders, which is I'm a little bit uncomfortable with single founder companies, but we have back single founder companies also. But if there are more than one founders, then what are the roles that they're playing? Because startups can tend to see that too many cooks in the kitchen syndrome. So if it's not a complementary skill set, I think it is a bit of a flag. Because sometimes you see that in a very early stage company, there's somebody who's a CEO, and then there's a COO, then there's a CBO, and then there's a CIO. Like, why do you need so many people with those heavy titles? And what are you bringing to the table? And then the other aspect, of course, as an investor is, therefore, what is the equity dilution if you have too many people? So every person has to be there for a purpose. Complementary skill sets is definitely a key. I think outside of that, knowing, I think people who have faced adversity of some kind, right, whether it
Yeah.
is health and sickness related of your own, of your family members, or it is, like I said, adversity could be in a sports farm, or it could be, somebody got laid off, somebody, any of these things, right? I think those tell you that the person has what is needed, which is resilience, right? That they can bounce back. Because in a startup journey, I think there will be more low moments than high moments, and the media will only show you the high moments. But if somebody doesn't have the ability, like I certainly remember passing on a few deals where other things were fine, but uh, let's say if you're during a live pitch like this, and somebody's internet connection kind of is breaking, or something, electricity goes out or something, and you see them so damn flustered. So I'm like, if you're so flustered with because a high stakes meeting, something went wrong, so how will you manage when stakes are higher? So I think that resilience plays a very, very important role. So these are soft sounding factors, but in my mind these are like power factors. So self mastery is very, very important, and in the founder and the founding team. And then, of course, I do want to know that for the skills that you yourself do not possess, can you hire the right people, right?
Yeah.
And then in that is baked in, sometimes people are so greedy with equity that their ESOP pools are like 5%, 3% or something. So that itself is a thing that if you are not willing to share wealth with your team, who will come in and build something fantastic for you, then that itself is a flag. So it's a complex set of factors, but I think I want to do business with good people, right? And somebody gave a very nice definition of it, that alignment, right? Jahan pyar nahi, wahan vyapar nahi. So I think just having that mutual love and respect is very important, because it will be a long-term relationship, right? So that alignment is very important.
Great. No, thanks, Raul. I think what one of the biggest takeaway I would have is that, be authentic about presenting your team and your self capability, and also, acknowledging what we don't know, and also, like you said, be open to hire, be open to acknowledge that okay, this is the gap, and not to get very fancy about team capability. That hey, we can go to moon, but you know that you can't even go to Gurgaon, right? So I think being open and honest about it, I think that will also help you as investor, I believe. Right. Now, a couple of questions I want to pick, which way we will deviate, but let's keep those questions also. Very quick question from Mark: is prototype necessary for investor to invest in a company? Maybe like a rapid fire. One of you can pick up this question. Uday, you want to just a quick one?
Is a prototype necessary? It really depends. It depends on the context in which is it engineering? Is it is it software? So it varies. So sometimes a prototype is extraordinarily hard to put together because of other material constraints of money and whatnot. But you can have an idea which is transformative, but it's obviously riskier. So we would be cautiously optimistic and engage further, but we will have to obviously, yeah, that's what I can think.
Got it. Very interesting question from Vishal. I think Rahul, you can pick it. Is it necessary that all founders speak during the pitch? If not, do they all need to be there during the pitch? Asking as if only one is responsible for fundraise, others will be uncomfortable, or one responsible may be stopping others to speak. What's your take on this one? Very,
Yeah,
very
I think it's an important question, Vishal. Thanks for asking. I think again, no one best way, but at some time in the and I'm assuming the pitch is not just one off half an hour. Like we like to spend a lot of time with our potential investee companies. So if in the first or second conversation only one person who's responsible fundraise is there and they can tell the story, that's fine. But at some stage, will be important to see everybody. Not only, I mean, not to evaluate their elocution capabilities, but that, hey, do they have a grasp on the area that they will be leading? That's number one. And I can certainly remember examples where even though the person doing the pitch was good, but when we asked for meeting their CTO and that person met, and we asked for meeting them separately, and it went downhill after that, right? Because the person did not seem to have the grasp, and that company would have needed to build low latency systems, and this person did not come across as possessing that capability. And then I'd say that I think it's good to show up with strength, right? I mean, at some point it'll be good to have everybody there, get them talk. I think the other soft factor I'm always evaluating is that how well do they work with each other. So one of the companies I remember, two founders, very young people, again not from your IITs, etc. But man, they came across as so combative with each other in the pitch, right? And I had to give them feedback that, hey, I mean, with me it's all right, but if you show up like this with other other investors and other institutional investors, I mean, they will. That's a drop from there. And they got it. They just needed that feedback. They just needed to have somebody there. And now you see them so complimentary. It's just so nice to see them completing each other's sentences. So sometimes it's a skill gap, it's a blind spot, but I think it is important to show up with strength, at least in one of the interactions, if not all of them.
Sure. Great. Now let me get back to the planned questions, and we can pick up some questions later. Now the next is market potential. I'm sure what you look for from startups is a clear understanding of the market size, growth potential. How they should convey this to investors, which does not look like a fad. And are you also looking for a well-defined and convincing go-to-market strategies? And where does competitive analysis fit in this market potential conversation? So maybe Rahul, you want to pick it?
No, absolutely. So I think over the years I've really come to believe in this almost boring sounding deal evaluation criteria, that the problem space that the company is solving has to be large, has to be permanent, and has to be growing. Right? If it's not large, not interested. If it's not permanent, if it's very faddish, not interested. If it's not growing, it's a problem. We can assess. So large, permanent, and growing for sure. But that doesn't mean that. I mean, sometimes people come with these fancy sounding models, but they stand on a house of cards in terms of assumptions. So that is not necessarily a good thing. But like, can you communicate the conviction that why is this large, why is this permanent, why is this growing? That is more important than some back of the envelope numbers, etc. That I'd much rather we do it together based on a shared understanding. Is a convincing go-to-market strategy important? I think really depends on the stage of the company and what they're building. Go-to-market strategies can be built. We can help build. I can help build. We can find people in the network. But are you building something which is needed by a lot of people? I remember what Larry Page, the founder of Google, says, right, that things and ideas have to pass the toothbrush test. That means they are used by many people at least once a day, if not twice a day, right? So that is what I mean by large, permanent, and growing. And what about competitive analysis? I think if the space is large, I think some people try too hard to make a 2x2 in which they are on the right top quadrant and everybody else is in the other three quadrants. I think that also feels a bit desperate. I think if the problem is large, permanent, and growing, it is good for there to be other competition. Many spaces lend themselves to 3, 4, 5 large companies that can be built. So it's not a problem. Not talking about competition, I think, reeks of a little bit of ignorance or arrogance, both of which are a problem. So yeah, please do the competitive analysis. Let's see where you fit in, and it's fine. I mean, many times new companies can come in and give the established incumbents a run for their money. So competition is not a bad thing.
Sure. Great. Now, before in interest of time, there are a lot of questions I want to pick up. So, Uday, I will ask a different question from you. The product or the service, how do you evaluate the product or a service? And is having a unique value proposition is always important? Like, it has to be like a mandatorily pushed to investors. That would be question for you.
I'll actually bounce this to Rahul if you don't mind, Rahul.
Okay, sure.
No, absolutely. So I think let's start with the USP. I think if I go back to the cheaper, better, faster, right? Like if you're not cheaper, if you're not better, if you're not faster, then hey, I mean, what are you doing? So there has to be, whether we call it unique value proposition or not, but there has to be something that if you're a pure copycat uh, and you are at the same cost as incumbent, not lower. So what are we doing? And then, by the way, not to joke about it, I mean, we have come across companies like that where even after 2 hours later, I mean, you still don't know what is their unique value prop. And so moat is important in that sense. Evaluate the product or service. I think everybody will have their own theme. But for me, I think tech is very important. That is tech up. Because we previously spoke about, is it a large problem? Is it a permanent problem? Is it a growing problem? In the solution, do you have some tech? Because if it is ops heavy, there may be others who may be interested. I am not interested. So everybody will have their own criteria. But from a product, what else can I say? I think what are the drivers? What are the of demand? What are the drivers of cost? I think those would be important. But I think we're talking high level. We can be more specific in a different example.
Sure. So the next area is the business model. This is perhaps the trick one. So let's look at three areas: a sustainable and a scalable business model, unit economics and profitability, a clear monetization strategy. What are you looking for here, and where do startups fall short when conveying these to you as investors? Maybe Uday, you want to pick this up?
Yeah, I think this is an important one which centers around value capture, right? So sustainable, I think, is dur ki baat, but because competition is very, I mean, if anybody has studied any little bit about the nature of competition, that profit pool which any startup, any business is trying to capture is going to be attacked by 50 or 100 other players as well. So sustainable is very, very hard to do, right? Very few businesses are actually able to create sustainable value, and hats off to them when they're able to do it. But it's important for us, we're not looking for the moon. I mean, if you're really looking for, all these things in the early stage, we might as well be investing in listed businesses in the public markets where you can see all these things very clearly. You can see gross margin, net margin, etc. And at the early stage, to be fair, what we're looking for is some evidence of a solid understanding of these ideas in their specific approach to their product or solution and our service. And they need to sort of demonstrate that they are seeing unit economics which will likely sustain, and their insights as to why they will sustain or why they will exist to begin with, right? So what allows that approach to actually generate value? So they need to have an ability to articulate that. And when you're, it's a very basic question. Why will people pay for this? Like, why? What is it that is so interesting that people are actually going to open out their wallet? And everywhere, I mean, it's not easy for people to open their wallet, and certainly not in India, where we have very, very smart consumers. And we should never underestimate how shrewd and capable consumers are in their own evaluation of what is worth paying for. And many larger businesses also collapse, by the way, when they've grown to a certain size through perhaps unnecessary or not very wise venture capital. They realize that, perhaps there is no real business here to be built. There is no real value capture. And the public markets sort of give you that beating, right? They give you that dressing down and say, this is not going to work. I mean, I'm not sure where you're seeing value capture happening, but it's not going to work. And then you'll have to pivot again and see. But we're looking for an understanding from the founders that they understand where value exists in the market today, in the segments that they're operating in, who has captured value. And as Rahul mentioned, it's perfectly good to have competition, acknowledge them, understand how they might have captured value or they are not, and identify where there is the possibility of entry, and see where that actual willingness to pay might emerge.
Sure, sure. Great. No, thank you for that. Rahul, what do you see when you briefly mentioned about moat, right? So what do you define typically a moat? And we can also bring in IP angle, I can also share some insights. But what are you looking for here in terms of IP and moat of startups in general, in the pitch especially?
Yeah, I think for some tech sectors, like IP would be sort of a non-negotiable in that sense. But moat can also be, I think, a flywheel, right? That as more people come in, they attract more people, and that leads to more people staying in your system. In some examples, moat can simply be an insight that you have, which is very difficult to derive because you are operating at the intersection of, for example, we met someone, they are gaming plus AI plus low latency systems plus something else. So I mean, just operating at the intersections itself can be a moat. Um, I think the unique combination of the team can be a moat. But I think somewhere I want to know that whatever you're building the company of today, that others are not able to copy in 6 months, and that copy is not only because of intellectual property. It is also sometimes execution is a way. Sometimes let's say some companies are building with market in the US but dev in India. Now that can itself be a not really a moat, but can be a big advantage for them. So I think moat sometimes gives the sense of that, okay, what can I even say which is completely impenetrable? But it's not. Sometimes it's like 5 or 6 things where you are 6 months ahead of everybody else, and they will become accruing advantage to you as the business progresses. So I don't want people to kind of lose heart if they can't think of one definitive thing or that. But yeah, I mean, I do feel that Indian companies can do better in terms of understanding intellectual property, protecting it in the markets where they will operate, especially if they are in uh, industries where that subject matter lends itself to intellectual property protection. But sometimes, like, people are so lax. I mean, I know some Series A type of companies where they haven't even done a trademark, right? Some D2C companies who haven't done a trademark, and that just feels like, man, what are you thinking? I think most of these folks are unaware, and there I feel that Govind, you and your company and your peers have a role to play in educating, and of course you're doing your part. But mode can be IP, many forms of IP, but mode can also be execution. It's also operating in the intersection. It's also a flywheel. It's also low cost. It's also very prudent build out of the business, and a combination of all of these.
Sure.
And
No,
just
sure.
to
So I also want to address Gopi had a question that how to protect ideas or startup from copying by others while discussing idea across the pitch. And I think my take from IP person is that most of the time we just don't action just because we have this fear that somebody will steal it, right? So I always say that, hey, go execute and we'll figure it out. I think at a very early stage, yes, you can do some basic IP and trademarks and provisionals and all that, but I think what I do want to share here, from my experience, that a lot of time it becomes like I don't want to talk about it because I fear somebody will copy. I mean, if you don't discuss, then how will you know, right? So I think that would be my answer to this question. Taking this liberty to answer this question, that just go and execute. I'm sure you will figure it out. Just don't get in that mental state that somebody will copy. Somebody will definitely copy. If you're successful, I'm sure everybody will copy, and that's a compliment, not a threat, right? So I think that's what it is. Now,
Sorry, Uday was saying something. Yeah? Uday, were
yeah,
you want to add to
yeah,
this?
you will take it.
No, I completely agree with you, Govind. It's the execution which will matter, not so much the idea. There are plenty of ideas. You can find ideas on Twitter for now, for example. But I just want to, just a small addition to what Rahul was mentioning about the moat. There's also this idea of the durability of the moat,
Okay.
right? So how long will this moat last? And again, it always helps, the old sage advice to be paranoid, because this moat will eventually collapse, and sometimes eventually is 3 months. So because we're in a hyper growth world, every so-called competitive advantage that has been gained through significant effort even will be taken away from you. It's just the nature of the market. So we cannot sit too easy and too long on a particular edge, so to speak, because it will be competed away. So it's generally helpful for founders to have that mindset that everything that you think is really unique may actually vanish. And so work even harder to actually create that defensibility and continually work on it, and do not just lose sight of that fact that competition is here and it will eat you at some point. So that's and as so far as you are able to expand that duration of that moat, you will continually create value.
Great insight. Thank you there for adding that. Now, finally, the last section of the pitch is usually the ask. Now, what's your, how startups should be absolutely clear about what they are asking from you, and how can they justify their valuation and how they intend to use the fund. So if you can share some bit of tips around the ask element of the pitch, that would be really great. If you want to pick, I'm okay. Either of you who feel you can pick it.
Oh, they should do it. Yeah.
Uday,
Okay. What they're asking for. I mean, I think it's so straightforward and simple at the end of the presentation or their pitch. If you have been persuasive enough to reach the very end, and an investor has had the patience to come to the end of your compelling presentation and understanding of what you're doing, then the ask is actually straightforward. I need 2 CR for this. I need 300K for this, and I will, apportion it in this manner. And frankly, it's important. While it's important to see it, we are cognizant that there is going to be a lot of variability on how that capital will actually be deployed. And that's fine. We need to be flexible as early stage investors. But we're also looking, early on to see if there is some evidence that, that founders understand that capital allocation by itself is a very important subject, very important to study how the great businesses, both in India and abroad, have been built. And what are the principles? What are the foundations? What's a share buyback? What can you do? What are the 4 different things you can do with capital? So think about these things, study them, and when you talk about the ask, okay, fine, you will have hopefully some idea, and hopefully it's a good guess on how you will use that money. On that valuation point, valuations are super subjective, right? And that's one of the difficult and sore spots, if you may, of investing, and it's one of the trickiest things in early stage to get right. How can they justify their valuation? Often they can't, and sometimes startups can't, or they throw a number and hope that it works. And investors or VCs who have large checks might end up funding it without perhaps enough of a pushback or enough of a negotiation on it. But look, valuation, it's a question of a handshake, right? If there is a meeting of supply and demand, it's fine. Sometimes we would pass on something which is a bit too optimistic at the early stage, something which is significantly higher in valuation than we would like. Perhaps is too optimistic, and the person who's, let's say, previously funded the startup is good for them, but it's not okay for us. And again, this is a subject that founders ought to spend a lot of time thinking about, because at each stage you're going to have clarity on why you're raising at that particular valuation, and it's worth reflecting on what are you trying to and go back to the basics, go back to bootstrapping, and thinking, okay, it's not for example, we've seen a lot of celebration around simply raising capital, right? Somebody gets a Series A check of X, and as it's a celebratory moment. Okay, it's a milestone, or there's a mock-up for somebody, very good, but there's a lot to think about. If that raise was at a very optimistic valuation, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for your subsequent round, and you might have to think about what this means in the long run. So that long run is something you have to think about as a founder, and hopefully that will come across in the conversation that we engage in.
Thanks. Rahul, any because it's the last conversation on the pitch, I have the last question after that. So any recommendation on this ask element?
Yeah, I think you may not exactly use the money as your slide says you will, but if you don't have a slide, I think that worries me. That did you even think about it, or did you just come in because it's fancy to raise? So that's one, I think. And second is, I think that frugality is important, right? Just because you are able to raise doesn't give you the license to go just burn. And I know maybe it's an unpopular view from me, because burn was the at least that was the theme of the music of the party for the last 2 or 3 years. But where has that landed so many companies, and where has that landed the valuations we can see? So I think for me, frugality is important. I'm happy to pass on 1, 2, 10, 100, 500 companies because we don't align on that value. But I'm happy to invest in 3 companies, which maybe they'll do well, maybe they won't, but at least we are aligned on the value. So frugality is important. Treat the money that you got from somebody else just like you will spend your own money. So that is important.
Sure. Good. Thank you, Rahul and Uday. That was certainly to take in, and I'm sure this is such an invaluable lesson that when I'm sure some of the listeners maybe making that pitch deck, maybe refer this conversation again. And of course, this recording is available on our this channel and YouTube, and do not hesitate to, of course, look it back again or pass it to your friends who are making or in the process of pitching. Now, before we end up and have questions, as promised, we are also going to touch upon pitch deck. What makes a compelling pitch deck? Could you each list down like top 3 criteria? What do you think make a pitch deck from a looks point of view? That really interests you. Is it like visual appeal, some sort of kind of cheat sheet which people should follow when they're creating this entire story in a slide deck? So yeah, Rahul, or that you want to pick?
I can go. I think for me, 3 things are: one is, and maybe it's my bias, but I really get attracted to decks which are attractive. So the fonts, the colors, the backgrounds, the transition. I don't mean animation, but like maybe like a clever use there. I think hey, it's the first thing that somebody sees. Maybe it's my years in consulting which have kind of biased me towards that, but I definitely get, because you see the effort, right? You see the effort come through. So that's number one. The second is, I think, uncluttered. A lot of people mix up that decks are used for 2 purposes. One are leave behind decks. The other are decks that will that you will use for pitching. And they use the leave behind decks, which have a lot of text, a lot of details to do the pitching. But I think we kind of forget that if you put a cluttered slide on the screen, the person will naturally be wired to read the slide on the screen than listen to you. So please declutter it and use it as an aid to the story that is coming out of your mouth, as opposed to the other way around. So uncluttered is very important. And third, I think I've really come to get have a liking for humanized stories, right? If you are in some way or the other, you're impacting lives of people, right? Whether it's a B2B or B2C. But who is your persona? What do they look like? What do they do in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, in a quarter? If you can put in pictures, I think that just humanizes. It just connects. It's very memorable, because I know people look at tens, if not hundreds of decks every month. How will they remember yours during the DD stage? I think therefore memorability is a emotion that you want to aim for, and I feel humanized stories is a very easy way to do that. Okay?
Sure. Great.
No, I go completely. Simplicity is so important to get right, and I think this is a subject I wouldn't add any more criteria than what Rahul has already added. But I would just ask founders a simple question, which is how many legendary pitch decks can you recall from memory? So is it 5? Is it 20? And the reason of asking this question is you only become really good at what you actually study. Right. So if you're looking to get a compelling pitch deck, study the greats. You should know what worked in Uber's 2008 deck, or in Shopify's deck, or in Airbnb's deck. You should know what really, really worked and why it worked, perhaps. And you should actually have 20 or more such examples in your own personal study of what makes a compelling deck. And there's so much good material to study from, but you don't get better without actually putting in the effort, right? So do not assume that just because you know how to put a PowerPoint together that you are a good storyteller. Storytelling is an art. You do need to be really good at it, because the opportunity is the opportunity is fantastic, but it's tough to get attention. So it's worth spending time to really become exceptional at it and learn from the best. And so yeah, I'll just stop with that.
Sure. Now, while you said learn from the West, I think would you recommend any resource talks, for this entire topic of pitching and how to create these presentation? I know you both must be reading a lot of things and watching a lot of TED talks or whatever resources. But what would you recommend people who are listening in to what they must absolutely go and learn from, and what are the resources they should refer?
The simplest one is YC. They should just know the YC site inside out. It's a great. I mean, you have the whole range of information from pre-seed to Series A to beyond. You have so much information on how you could go about design, structure. There's a ton, but there's also, I mean, you have to also think about what it takes to be a great founder, right? So pitch deck is one aspect and very important. There's a guy on Twitter who teaches storytelling. We can put that in the YouTube link of this or LinkedIn link at the bottom of this video. But there's also the ability to get into the minds of great business leaders or fantastic entrepreneurs, and that's why I was mentioning David Senra at the beginning of this interview or discussion. So founders would actually appreciate a lot being able to think and envisage and imagine like how great founders have done before us, and build something outstanding. And there's plenty of opportunity to actually literally stand on the shoulders of giants and do it really well. But it takes time, right? So it's reading biographies is not for everyone, and I get that people don't like reading, but at least listen. Right? This is one way to get better insights over time.
Great. Rahul, any resources you would recommend?
No, there are lots of resources, so I won't be doing justice by giving names, but there are lots of compilations of great pitches, this, that, whatever. But I'd say maybe the resource that you need is a camera and a sound recorder, so that you can record and you can see. You can record and you can see, and do that 20 times, 2,000 times, 20,000 times, whatever it takes. Because no amount of reading alone will make it yours till you practice it. Right. So these days, I think there are AI apps which will record how you come across the modulation, the lack of modulation, etc., etc. But I think most people possess the ability that once they see themselves, they'll get a whole 20 list of 20 things that they can improve by themselves. And then, of course, hopefully you have some friends you can show how does this look like, and they will say. So I think it's a combination. Look at the best, read about the best, but also build up a personal, style. Because if you just try to copy others, you will falter somewhere under pressure. But if you've practiced in front of the video or the in front of the camera or the mirror, I think that will stay with you.
Great. Now I'll pick questions. I think we are almost on time, but we have few more minutes. If you allow 5 minutes, we'll pick up questions and we can answer them. Sure. And you can, Rahul and Uday, would you be kind that there are some questions which I feel are directed to you, may not be relevant to the topic. If you can go back and reply them from Sanjay, and a lot of people have a lot of questions. Akshay has this question on IT founders being complicated. So if you can reply it later than the live, that would be great. But I think very interesting observation, and I think I do want to pick this very interesting comment by Anamika. Isn't a vision and a translation of that vision a good enough point of investors? Rest everything is money game, right? I think this again. I think that's a very one of the most common conception about pitching the startups, right? And I have a vision, I pitched it, and it's all about money, honey. Of course, we have discussed a lot of these things, that a lot of things matter. But what would you say about it?
I think conjuring up a vision is not easy, but you have to think about that necessary and sufficient, right? Like it is necessary, but it is not sufficient. So it's not. I don't think vision plus it's all about the money, honey. On the other things is I don't think it's that simple. Life needs to be led every day. You have to execute every day. You cannot just say that, hey, I executed really well till yesterday, and from today I will not. So I don't think it's. We've seen so many companies who are so damn well funded, and what catastrophic failures they end up being. So I think it's a lot of things. I think when done well, I think it's literally life changing. you grow as a person for sure. So I think it's I mean, the simplest analogy I can give, right? Let's say if there's an 8-day-old baby and there's an 8-year-old man. If the 8-year-old man says that, hey, I have so much experience in taking a breath, so I don't really need to do that anymore, what will happen? They will die the next day. So it doesn't matter how long you've done it, you have to do it every single day again, right? So I think it is about living your life as a company every day, and every day will matter. And you stop doing it, and then that's the start of a decline. So I don't think it's only about the vision. Vision is good, but listen, I really believe that ideas are free. It's execution which is priceless. You can go read a patent, copy somebody else's idea, but that alone, just the idea will not be sufficient. This is 2023. Ideas can be replicated.
Yeah, I just want to just one thing that Rahul said. You have to live your life every day, and in the context of companies that are, let's say, larger companies, okay, Series B onwards, very well funded, some big names have funded them. That living life every day also comes with a pertinent question: is how, in what value, with what values are you actually executing on every single day, and how high is integrity in that list for you? Are you perfectly okay with taking some shortcuts? Okay, how big are these shortcuts going to be? Who's going to look? And maybe nobody gets to know. And hey, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Some other guy says, hey, why everybody's doing it? It's okay, yaar. Just don't worry about it. And so that's why, in the listed markets in India, it's actually a great example. Listed markets in India demonstrate, actually even in the US, demonstrate that high reputation and high integrity is extraordinarily rewarded. And there is a huge premium that these companies get simply for decades-long reputation of high integrity. And it's funny to call them founders, but these are, let's say, MDs or CEOs of companies that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years. But their competitors have a significant degree of respect for them for doing the right thing, even in difficult circumstances, not undercutting, just being generous, sharing what exists. So this is very, very hard to do. So we're talking about living every single day. So these values come into play even at the early stage. And when you are actually building an organization, you have to think about these things very carefully, because all your people in your team are observing how you think and how you behave, right? And if you are demonstrating an example that this is going to be fine, don't worry about it, I'm the boss here, I call the shots, it's a matter of time, right? And the ones that are really going to build out well have taken hard decisions and stomached difficulty and kept reputation intact. And these things matter a lot. So it's worth remembering it.
Great. Thank you. I think last question, I know we are already ahead of time, but I'll pick this last question. I know a lot of comments by a lot of people, Sanjay, Jayant. I'm sorry, I would not be able to address all of those, but last question by Ranjit. What are the top markers used by investors while they choose to invest in or buy a services company? I think very, very relevant question, and I think some service element to the pitching of a service company. I think would be a practical question. So some advice on that would be.
I can take it, but please understand that this is one person's answer to your question. The more number of people you ask, they will have. So we don't really invest in services companies. I have not done much, but if I had to, I think I would love to see that is there a path to productizing the service? Because the problem with a services business that remains a services business is that as it scales, the overhead costs of quality control and then recruiting and then training and then the churn management, etc. just becomes wage inflation, right? Just becomes so much, and then maybe your star employees will leave with some of your customers, and then you'll always be capped at the size of the business you can build. So services businesses usually do not. I don't see them as venture grade, but yeah, services businesses which do things manually for some time but then productize it, that could be something, right? That you are using a core team of talented people who you can keep on your roles for a long time, but keep making products out of their service when the value prop is high. I think that could be very, very good. But in general, I think whether venture funded or not, if you can productize your services, I think that will give you a cushion in the margins, which enables you to reinvest in the business.
Great.
Yeah, I would also add to to study Quest Corp in the listed markets. Just take a look at that company and study how they've been building the last 20 years.
Great. Great. Thanks, Uday. I think very valuable. I have so many questions I could not ask due to, I know you are busy and you have to push off, and we want to keep the live 1 hour. But please do answer some of the questions and comments after when you're free on LinkedIn. But thank you for taking off and being here today. Such a valuable session. And I really, really wish before I let you go, a bit about Blue Lotus, what kind of startups you invest in, very brief, so that people can also relate what kind of startups you deal in. I'm sure that would be a great closure for this session. Yeah.
Rahul?
Yeah, I think sector agnostic. I think founder quality, problem space are more important than anything else. So you can see the portfolio there and see the spread a little bit, but generally tech as a part of the solution is very important. So that's there. But yeah, I mean, please write in. Hopefully you got some tips on the pitch and how to write in. I think do that. But nothing is off the table as such. I mean, if it's very capital intensive business, then Blue Lotus may not be the right entity for you as an early partner. But if it's not capital intensive, then please write in.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Rahul. Just I think again
checking if Uday wants to add. Uday, would you like to add something?
No, that's good. That's good. Thanks. Thanks for saying it. Just look up the portfolio at bluelotus.vc/portfolio and take a look. Yeah.
Great. Thanks again. I wish you the best, Rahul and Uday.
Thanks, Govind. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To the audience, you can follow Rahul and Uday at the links posted in the comments. As we close the session 3, thank you once again for all your support. We really appreciate your support. Today we have had 50 plus, 60 plus live audience. I'm really, really thankful to all of you who have stick around, been with us in this entire conversation. The startup series is our endeavor to help startups overcome the hurdles you face in a daily and you move forward to the goal. Should you have any topics and you appreciate your feedbacks, write it to me, put it on a comment. I would love to pick up those topics. And do not forget to follow me and Arctic Invent on LinkedIn for the next upcoming live sessions. We are going to start again in July. It's like, we are just ending the quarter in June. So we thought, let's call it a season 3. And you can all access all the episodes of all the seasons on our YouTube or Arctic Invent LinkedIn page. Now, thank you and see you in July and with an exciting topic. Thank you again. Wish you a good evening.